Hello and welcome to Storyboard18, Parul, Mark. Pleasure to have you both here with me. And Mark, lovely to see you again in India.
Yes, thanks for having
Just
me.
2 weeks after you have an expanded role at BCG. And it's been an interesting start to the year already. And Mark, during the course of this conversation, I want you, of course, to sort of bring in that global perspective. But Parul, I want you to sort of bring it home to India as well.
Of course.
And just to kick off with, the big question I think a lot of CMOs are grappling with, the way they've always defined themselves is as brand builders. But let me ask you this straight up. Mark, I'll ask you this first. Is that definition outdated today? What are CMOs today evaluated on? How different is it from even, say, 5 years ago?
It's one word, growth. I think that, yes, brand is still critical, but at the end of the day, results matter. And companies are investing in a major way, but CFOs want the outcomes. And whether it's technology for AI, whether it's people upskilling to deal with these new tools, CMOs do need that investment, but they need to back it up with results and build a self-funding journey.
Parul, do you sort of see, again, I'm going back to the idea of that definition of what a CMO is today. What's the take? What's the view from India when you talk to executives, marketing executives? What are they thinking? How is that evolution happening?
This entire evolution actually becomes even more important in a country like India, right? Because here, it's all about balancing speed with complexity. We are a very complex market. It's actually not one country, it's many countries in one. We have value, we have premium, we have the metros, we have rural, we have online, offline, and every part of it is so sizable. And with this complexity, marketers do need to think the full funnel of a customer, right? So not just capturing demand that exists today or not just generating demand for tomorrow. It needs to start from acquisition to conversion, to retention, to then the full lifetime value of the consumer. So just layering on what Mark said, it's all about business outcomes. It's all about growth, end-to-end, full funnel. And actually, marketing is not a brand or an RT or a creative function anymore. It's really a growth function now.
And I felt the energy in all my discussions in the last couple of days in India. It's so much about that growth piece where I think around the world, different markets are in different places. Many are under cost pressure and pulling back. Here, bold investments are the norm. People are asking how they can take this to the next level. That's definitely the message I've gotten.
Then let me just zoom in on this. Given the expectation today of marketers and CMOs particularly, what do CMOs really have to arm themselves with, Mark? Is this just too much disruption too quickly, coming their way? What are they struggling with? And what do they really need to arm themselves with to capitalize on this growth, to be ahead of the curve?
Yeah. So we're all on a learning journey. I think CMOs themselves as well. And that curiosity is really critical, both for junior marketing teams, but also the CMO and even the CEO themselves. We actually just came out with our consumer AI radar. One of the biggest takeaways is that leaders who invest in upskilling themselves, and the number is about 8 hours a week or more. If the leader spends that much time, the CMO, the CEO, immersing themselves in the AI tools and the cutting edge technologies with the teams, then they can go and ask the questions and challenge the teams, and the teams will go and challenge themselves as well. And you see organizations that do that have GenAI adoption rates of 70% plus. Organizations that don't have that, you see below 30%. So I think that's the number one challenge, is how do you stay ahead of the learning curve, carve out the time to stay ahead, because things are changing so quickly. You need to lead the teams. You need to lead with curiosity.
Absolutely. I think that goes for all of us, right? Upskilling and learning, it's a constant journey. But Parul, on the India question here again, just build on what, of course, Mark has said. What does, we make this sort of distinction very often between legacy organizations, new age companies. Now we're talking about AI native marketing organizations. What are they doing organizations that are perhaps operating at 30%, like you said, Mark, for them to get to that 70%? What do organizations today need to do to become AI native?
I think our firm belief at BCG is that it's not just about machines versus humans. What's going to be successful is human plus machine. So marketing needs to, and actually all organizations at a broader level, not just marketing, need to evolve from human-centric to human plus machine. And actually that coming together is what, in our experience, has delivered superior results. And therefore, in this human plus machine world, what matters is not whether you can code or whether you can get the right creative out. It's about whether you have the right customer understanding, whether you have the right judgment, whether you have the right strategic thinking, and whether you can work with the AI agent to get to the superior outcome. And that's relevant across the world and relevant in India. I think the one place, and I was discussing this with Mark yesterday, the one place India, however, is probably unique is because deploying AI in India is going to help unlock the next wave of growth. We're not deploying AI to unlock cost reduction or efficiency. It's really around unlocking the next wave of growth, and that's going to create the powerful outcomes that we really need in the country.
But what does that look like? Because right now, all the conversations that I've been having, I'll be honest, it's just down to cost effectiveness and efficiencies. When will that conversation shift to that point about unlocking growth, Mark?
Yeah, so I think this is where leaders are ahead of the game. The easy, quick wins, for example, in marketing and GenAI have been around things like content creation, easy adaptation, where you see some costs come out. Leaders are moving beyond that. And the way they're doing that is they're stitching together agentic workflows, all the way from insights, being able to mine all of their data and really get to actionable ideas for marketers to act on, then linking it to these content GenAI tools, and then activating that action as well very quickly, shrinking the times down from 6 weeks to 6 hours to launch a campaign. And when you do that, you can capitalize on real-time trends. You see the ROIs go up 20, 30%. So it's not just a cost story anymore. We're seeing real results.
And if I were to make this real in the context of India, right, and picking up the same point that Mark made on creative and content generation, imagine a human sitting and trying to make multiple variants of the same creative targeted towards slightly different consumers. Now imagine the human actually working with an AI agent to be able to do that. You can actually move from 10 variants of the creatives to thousands and millions variants of the creatives very quickly. And that's why it matters so much in a complex market like ours.
We'll come to that point, and I want to talk about personalization a little later in the conversation as well. But let me get back to something that again marketers are grappling with, which is this anxiety and fear about becoming irrelevant. Which marketing roles actually become more valuable in the AI era?
So for sure, the marketing science is getting elevated because, as I said at the outset, you need to measure results and you need to do that on the fly. Every campaign is an experiment and you should be learning and acting on those learnings. But you can't do that if you don't have the science set up in the right way. So we're seeing organizations evolve from equal parts creative and orchestration or brand management to more of a third between creative, brand management, and science. So that role is definitely getting elevated. I think the other place where I'm excited about the future is roles that used to be distinct being able to be thought of by one person. For example, new product launches, you would have the R&D team dream up the innovation and the marketing team come up with a campaign for it. With GenAI tools, you can see concepts getting created and then immediately being transformed and translated into the campaign idea by a strategic marketer. So that experienced strategic marketer role will become more valuable, will become more expansive in how it's defined.
Parul, and another thing is we are of course seeing different rates of adoption different rates of staying ahead of the curve according to industries and sectors as well. Any insights on that? Do you see marketers of a certain kind in a certain industry or sector being more open to learning, deploying, empowering their teams essentially to really leverage what this technology can offer? Because currently a lot of people are just tinkering with it, right? We know that we're at that tinkering stage, but already we are seeing so many of those unlocks happen. Uh, Go into sectors that you feel are perhaps slightly ahead.
If I were to de-average, and I think you use the word tinkering, I think it's really apt. Tinkering, dabbling, almost every organization now is, and if I go and talk to many of our clients, and if I ask in a room, hey, how many of you have used, Gen AI or AI for work? All hands go up, because almost everyone's interacted with ChatGPT and used some
Absolutely.
agent,
In
right?
rudimentary ways.
Exactly.
Let's
So
be
everyone's
honest.
tinkering and dabbling with it. But our research has suggested that it's only about maybe 20% of companies which have truly embedded AI into their operating model and workflows. And those 20% actually are able to deliver much more superior outcomes in terms of revenue growth and profitability versus the other 80%.
Give me a few examples of that 20% that you're talking about. What are they doing? What does embedding AI into operations look like for marketing organizations?
So if I take it specific to marketing, right? And if we look at the entire marketing funnel, starting from consumer insighting to creative generation to activation to optimization and measurement, it's actually changing that entire workflow and embedding AI into that entire workflow end to end versus doing it piecemeal. So for example, if I'm only using GenAI to create concepts which I want to go test with the consumers, that's tinkering. Embedding is using synthetic twins to conduct the research, then translating that into insights by a human plus agent approach, then using that to actually create content, using that to then go into activation through a set of channels, optimize, measure, that entire funnel getting completely rewired or reframed using AI. That's what integration
Yeah,
means.
and not surprisingly, some of the leaders in terms of sectors, when you look at this, are the more consumer-centric companies, both in the companies that are tech forward. So media and entertainment companies I talked to, for example, earlier this month at the Consumer Electronics Show, they're talking about setting up autonomous campaigns where agents are creating the insights, creating the content, then activating them. And marketers are just setting the guardrails and looking at the measurement of those campaigns to decide what to do next. Some of my beauty clients in CPG are taking that inspiration and applying it as well. But I think the conversation is also shifting to some of the industries that have maybe been laggards in the past. More regulated industries like banks and pharma companies are also realizing they need to think more holistically throughout the marketing funnel.
You mentioned CES, Mark. Give me a little bit of an insight into
Yes.
what you saw, what stood out for you. A lot of stuff coming out of CES. Some of it very gimmicky.
Yes, I
What-
definitely felt that as I walked the show. The floor, and this happens every year, was all about the hype. And this year, the hype was about physical AI, humanoid robots, and robots that looked like dogs walking on the floor. And there's probably some exciting applications of that if I look 4 or 5 years ahead in the retail context and other physical environments. But where the energy was actually from the CMOs that I talked to over dinner and at the various events was much more about how do I drive scale and get returns from agentic AI, which was the hype 2 years ago. Now it's here, but it's still 2025 was still more of a piloting phase. And with all the uncertainty in the world, CMOs didn't have the dollars and the confidence to deploy at scale in many organizations. I do think 2026 is where we will see more at scale adoption, especially in these tech forward companies and industries.
How have investments in getting organizations AI ready, how have investments gone up? And again, are you seeing that a trend in certain sectors versus something else, CPG versus banking, whatever the case may be?
So we tracked that actually by sector, and we saw a big spike from 24 to 25, specifically in consumer. The investment levels have doubled. So it's, whereas 24, it was the tech companies, the media and entertainment companies leading the pack. CPG was a bit behind. That's shifting. And then the other sectors that are, again, more regulated, more conservative, are also starting to ramp up the investments. But there's also a lot of jaded CFOs out there, and I think they're trying to chunk up the journey in 6-month chunks and holding the organization, including the marketing function, accountable to the returns before they unlock the full envelope.
And if I were to add an India flavor, I think one thing that's distinct is, of course, CPG is at the forefront, but we actually see substantial AI movement in financial services and insurance in India. And of course, it's regulated, and therefore there are limits and boundary conditions to what the banks and the insurance companies can do. But they also have the best data.
Absolutely.
And therefore, the opportunity to do a lot of personalization, nudges, actually driving to cross-sell, upsell is just huge in financial services and insurance. And we've seen a lot of movement in that sector in India. And that's probably one place where India is a bit unique as compared to the Western markets as well.
Yeah, we definitely see it in all our research on customer expectations. India tops the charts in terms of a desire for personalization, willingness to provide your data in exchange for a better experience.
Which brings us to the point about personalization. Mark, we spoke about this the last time you were here. Again, with the core theme of AI, it's been almost a year since we spoke last. How has the needle moved on, hyper personalization at scale? Again, that promise of personalization that we've been hearing about for the past decade. How has it moved since we spoke last, Mark?
So I think in terms of the results around personalization, they continue to be there. And the investments are ratcheting up. I think where we're seeing both the good and the bad is just the sheer volume of content that is now available. With all these GenAI tools, as you said, content creation has been the place where it's really scaled.
And so that's the front end, right?
Yeah,
that's where
absolutely.
Where you sort of interact the most.
The content is there, and companies are generating the million variants of the campaign. I think where, though, there's a dichotomy is just how well they're then targeting that vast content library at customers. And you see the real leaders and laggards in terms of being able to apply that content and really dial in what gets shown, what's relevant, how are they spending their resources against that.
No, but tell me this. It was an interesting point you made, Mark, and we spoke about this last time as well, that different countries, different cultures have a different relationship to how much personalization they want. India happens to be one of those markets where people don't mind sharing that data and sometimes don't even think twice before sharing it.
As long as they get something in return.
That's right.
That's very
exactly
important.
Right.
Indians
it's
also
that
care about
transaction.
Value, and therefore it's about, hey, I will share my data as long as I also know what the brand is going to give me for that data. Like, what's the value?
But Parul, then where does it become too much? Because again, I'm zooming out a little bit into sort of a broader conversation around AI and privacy and issues around synthetic media and deep fakes and all of that, right? Which are all very, very real concerns. When it comes to put that marketing filter on it, what is it that CMOs and marketing organizations need to watch out for? Whether it's on the personalization front, whether it's how they engage with customers through their communications, whatever the case may be, with this surge in technology and AI use, what is it that marketers, CMOs have to keep their eye on?
You have to make sure, CMOs have to make sure that it doesn't become creepy for the consumer, right? Like, I shouldn't feel like there is someone stalking me and watching my every move and therefore just knows too much about me.
But I have a used to that already. You look
Your
up
phone
something
is
or you
listening,
talk about
right?
something and suddenly
And
you're
suddenly you'll get your
bombarded
feed,
with
Instagram
Yeah.
feed will be.
everything, whether it's your Instagram feed or you're browsing a website and suddenly you're seeing, hold on, what just happened? So we're beyond that. We are used to that now, right? What next? What do we need to look at now?
As you think about personalization for CMOs, I think so 3 things that stand out for me, right? And I'm thinking about this both in my role, but also as a consumer. I think one is, show me material based on the data I've willingly given you, and not based on what your algorithm has figured out about me, right? So, don't make me feel like you are trying to get to know me more than what I've told you. I think the second is explain to me why I'm seeing something. So, hey, you're getting this nudge for these red pants because you bought this black top a few days back, right? So explain to me why I'm seeing something. I think some of these guardrails or rules actually will reduce the creepiness that comes from personalization and will reduce a little bit of the fatigue. And I think the third is actually giving the consumer the option to set their preferences, to opt out if they don't want it, to tell you, hey, I want to see something only once a week or once in a month or once a fortnight, so that the consumer doesn't have fatigue from everything that they're seeing around them. And I think some of those practical guardrails and rules can actually help CMOs drive personalization without alienating the consumer.
Yeah. I love that point. I love that point about, that you want to know your customer, but you don't want to make them feel that you know them in a general way, essentially. You need to make it relevant. And I think AI gives you those possibilities, right?
Right. And I think this point around asking is so critical. I always tell my clients, zero-party data is actually even more important than first-party data. Zero-party data is what the customer actually chooses to tell you. And you have to be thoughtful about how you collect that. If you embed the questions into the experience, rather than just expect customers to go somewhere and fill out a bunch of information, and make it very clear what they're going to get in exchange, they're willing to actually provide that data. So don't just infer, ask, and then also think about how the algorithms will use that data. CMOs need to go to the next level in terms of responsible AI. For example, what checks should I have on the back end of the algorithms? Things like, are lower income customers getting less rich offers? Even if it's not embedded in how you design the algorithm, the outcome may be not what you intend as a brand. So what are the checks you need to put in place?
It will certainly require a lot more maturity going forward. One last question, and I want this to be a sort of like a closing note. If you could sort of summarize or distill some of what you've seen in the past year and what a CMO, any sector, any industry, any country needs to look out for in 2026, what would it be? Parul, I'll come to you first.
I think in the Indian context, I would say precision marketing at scale using AI. And what that means, I know it's a lot of jargon, but it really means being able to reach out to your end consumer or customer in a segmented, targeted manner at scale, which is only enabled in this world today because of AI.
And for me, I'll emphasize one thing I've already said, which is curiosity, leaning in, learning the tools, experimenting with the tools yourself. And then one thing that we didn't talk about that we would be remiss not to think about as CMOs, which is agentic marketing and how the LLMs themselves are changing the customer journey. CMOs need to think through what that means for their brands, how their whole business model needs to change, because discoverability search has already changed. The next step is how business models are going to change. And CMOs, if they want to drive growth, need to be on top of that trend.
Not become irrelevant. I love that point about jaded CFOs as well. Perhaps we leave that for another conversation, Mark. Thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure chatting with you both. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you. Thank you so much.